Let me go ahead. We're going to end early today because we want to give time for our children to come in, the youth music ministry. And when I say children, it goes all the way up through our middle schoolers. And so they're going to be continuing to develop, and we have our future musicians for our worship and praise. So we praise the Lord that we'll get an opportunity to hear them today, okay? So when they come in, you all smile at them, and you'll be really appreciative. All right, let me go ahead and pray for the message. Father, we just come to you, and we look to you. You will be the one to whisper in our hearts, to open our eyes, and then give us the motivation to move forward in obedience to your word. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so our title is A House is Not a Home. And most of you know that expression, okay? But even if you don't, you can probably guess. But I'm going to ask you to think, what do you think this is all about? When the expression came up, a house is not a home. Why do you think people came up with this expression? What kind of thoughts, what kind of feelings go through your mind? A home is forever? Okay. Thank you for volunteering. Anybody else want to volunteer some of their thoughts about this? A home is a what? Feeling. Yeah. Yeah, you just have a cold structure, right? Just a building. Just wood. Now they build them even without wood. But whatever they're building with building materials. But a home is different. There's feelings, there's history, there's people, there's the living of life together. Okay? The living of life together, doing things. So people who are sitting around the dinner table at home, all looking in their cell phones, well, they're not really living life together. But when they're talking to each other, when they're interacting, they're doing these sort of things. And clearly, this phrase originated because people realize a house, shelter is not enough. You want something far more. You want and long for a home where there is love, a friendly atmosphere, memories being made. You probably thought of a lot of different things. Well, we not only can apply that to a house, to a family, but we can apply that to a nation. A nation is more than its borders. It's more than the sum total of its people. In America right now, we're wondering, how much of a nation are we? Do we share common feelings about the past and what has gone before? Do we still believe that we are stronger together, that we have more in common than we have in differences? And so, it's not that easy to just say this nation is a nation. It may be just a collection of people within its borders. Now, this is what is happening in Nehemiah's day. As we come to chapter 5, the Jews who have left Babylon and come back and have started to try to build a nation, yes, they were all Jews. Yes, they all came with a purpose and a hope. But we're going to find that they were running into a crisis as a people. And the question is whether these things will be changed. And this chapter 5 comes in the middle of all the battles against the enemy. Chapter 4, a battle against Sanballat, against the people and all his responses. Chapter 6 is also the fight against Sanballat, except that chapter 6, it gets more personal. It's directed at Nehemiah. But in the middle of this, we get this wake-up call. A total change of pace. We're not talking about walls. We're not talking about building. We're talking about an interior problem. The problem is that the people of Judah were divided. Some of you know that famous play, Hamlet, that Shakespeare wrote. And there's a line in there that goes like this, that there's something rotten in the state of Denmark. Okay? And it wasn't so much a problem with Denmark, it was a problem in the royal family. And so we're going to discover that this is similar in Nehemiah's day, that there were two groups of people, what we call the haves and the have-nots. Okay? The people in power, the people who were rich, the people who were connected, and then there were those that were just the ordinary folk. And one group was oppressing the other. Guess which one was oppressing which? Okay, fairly obvious. The haves were doing this, and so just as in Denmark, Judah, there was something rotten going on. And you know, the reason God moves this up, because this is going to be the issue for everything after chapter 7, trying to bring the people together to dwell in unity, like we read earlier in Psalm 133. Well, this is going to take some effort. And God puts it in here as a wake-up call to say, guess what? If you finish building these walls, but if the people are not together, you have a far greater tragedy. You have a house that is not a home. You have a city with walls, but you don't have a nation, you don't have a unified people. And so God brings us forward to give us a glimpse, to not get us totally focused on just the physical building, but to say there is a far more important building to take place. And so we see the problem, but also in chapter 5, we see how Nehemiah sets an example for the rest of the people on how to build community. Okay? We remember in chapter 1, when his brother and other people came from Jerusalem to the palace to visit Nehemiah, he asked two questions. First question is, how are the people? Second question, how is the city? He hasn't forgotten the first question. In fact, the first question is the more important question. And so we are brought to that and back to that right here in chapter 5. Don't we all need a place we can call home? Not just the house. I mean, you know, many moms stay at home just so when the kids come home, hey, open the door. You smell the kitchen smells. You hear the kitchen noise. You crawl out, and there's a reply, a cheerful, friendly welcome. Such a difference. We can't all have that. I couldn't enjoy that when I was growing up. You know, became a street kid, very young. So I kind of feel that pain and that longing. And it's always been a part of me to want to see that, to experience it. We all need that total love, that unconditional acceptance, a freedom of living without fear, without judgment. And, you know, more and more we're not experiencing in our homes. More and more we're not experiencing in our nation. And sad to say, as I have been in the church for so many years, more and more I realize we don't have enough of it in our churches. So this is very, very relevant for me. Recently, I was at a hospital visiting this woman, very outstanding woman, and very capable. And they had called me, and the first thing they said was, so-and-so is not expected to live much longer. We would like you to handle the funeral for us. And so I made my first effort to get over there immediately, and I sat and talked with her, Pat and I, and we reminisced about the past. And we reminisced about how the church that she had grown up in had become for her her surrogate home. okay? It was her home away from home. It was the home that she didn't have. And, the father couldn't provide it. He didn't know how to provide it. But, he became jealous of the church. And he one time made this comment to her and to her siblings. Well, if you love the church so much, why don't you just move there? I've heard this many times with people that I've worked with, families that I've known, where the warmth that people received, the togetherness that they experienced at church, compared to their homes, which became no more than a roof over our head. And so people need it innately in their hearts. It's just part of our drive. And when it's missing, we'll settle for less. But when we have it, you know what? We'll do surprising things. When I was growing up in Sacramento as a teenager, one of my favorite topics to read about was about the gangs in New York and Philadelphia and Chicago. I wanted to read and find out about a life that was so different. And you know what the sociologist said? Kids would join these gangs because it became family for them. And they would steal, they would kill, they would do all manner of things because of their ties and their connections. And so when we have it, it's a very, very powerful thing. And so all of us seek it out. Some people, they seek it out through their job and through their career. And their workplace becomes their surrogate homes. You watch TV, and so many of the shows and sitcoms revolve around the workplace. And you see these people know each other's lives, become very much involved, sometimes entangled, sometimes enmeshed in each other's lives. Some people will go to fraternal organizations, right? When the Chinese immigrants were coming here, they had their benevolent associations, and they would go there for nothing else to sit, chit-chat, talk about the old days in the village, and feel that sense of home. I know some people, you know where their home is? They have a seat. They are season ticket holders to their favorite football team. And they know all the people sitting around them. And they come and they bring snacks for all the people who they see week after week. There was this one lady. They were part of a ballroom dance group, okay? Chinese group, ballroom dance. And she would always bring extraordinary food for their group so that when they weren't out dancing, they can sit and eat her lovely stuff. And so we will look for these things. Oh, and another one I read about, Manhattan Bloomingdale's. Some women, they had their favorite room. And they would meet their friends. They would share about fashion and stuff in their lives. You see how big a drive that is for us. And like I said, going back to my friend who was in the hospital, it wasn't that the parents didn't want it. They did want it. But they hadn't taken the time. They hadn't found the right ways to do it. And so I'm glad that even though in chapter 5 of Nehemiah, the problem is exposed, yet even more, we see a number of different things that Nehemiah does that builds the community. And just to give away the end point, and because we might be rushing at the end, I wrote them all in the back of the program, okay? So I don't get to the application. You can go home and read these things. But, God has intended that Jerusalem, indeed all of Israel, would be a place of love and togetherness. And today, he intends that for the church and the Christian home. All right, I'm going to take us through the entirety of chapter 5. We're going to do it Calvary Chapel style. We're going to go a verse at a time. or a few verses, and then I'm going to make comments that are needed to clarify, okay? Some of you love this style of expository. Others, you guys love the 3-point alliterated outline. Others of you love theological preaching. This is just one of the many ways in which it's done. So I'm going to ask you to do the reading, and we're going to share together, right? We're building community. So you got to read the verses while I make the explanations. All right. So we're just going to read verse 1 all together. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now this grabs our attention right away because usually women didn't get involved in these kind of activities, but it shows how bad things were. And so these families were coming together to Nehemiah, and who were they complaining against? The way it says it, their own Jewish brothers. Okay, so he's emphasizing the idea of a people divided, so you're going to find, as we go through this whole thing, a lot of mention of family members, of blood, of relationship, because this is the whole point. While on the outside, there should be the makings of a community, on the inside, it was absent. Okay? Let's go to next verse, verse 2. Okay, so verses 2, 3, and 4 bring out 3 problems, 3 groups who are being negatively affected. And then we're going to get to verse 5, which is their common complaint. So go ahead and read 3, 4, and 5 together, one after the other. So this is the common complaint. Okay, some of you may have gone through this experience. You go to the bank and you borrow money on your house, right? So you get a mortgage, and you're paying for a couple of years, and suddenly, one month, you get this letter from a company you never heard of. And what has happened? They have purchased your loan. See, the Jews had this system that God set up where if you get in debt, you can put your children in indentured servitude to another Jew. But the rule was, in year 7, everything gets restored, right? So what's happening is this. These shrewd guys are thinking, okay, so before the 7th year, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take these, and I'm going to sell it to the non-Jews, to whom the rule doesn't apply. That's happened to some of us with secondary mortgages, right? The cozy relationship we started with the first lender turns out entirely different by the time we get to the second one. And so they were getting around the requirement to restore by doing that. And later on, we're going to see that Nehemiah has to buy them out of slavery, okay? But they're saying, our kids are just like their kids. So why is it our kids are going into slavery? And so people are really feeling hurt about this. And so let's read 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so he, in the middle of this desperate building, what does he do? He says, this is more important. We stop building and we make this the priority. Okay? And it's not easy to call everybody together. Just like it wasn't easy to call together our 2 meetings. But he says, you know what? We got to stop everything and work this out. So we come to verse 8 where he speaks publicly to the whole group. Go ahead and read verse 8. Our Jewish brothers, your brothers. And again, he's emphasizing the connection. And these people caught red-handed, right? Got nothing to say. No excuse, no justification. But you see how wonderfully, how gracefully Nehemiah handles it. Let's read verse 9. So he points them to God, and he says, we need to walk in the fear of our God. Now, this comes up several times in Nehemiah. This is one of the core values of his life. In chapter 1, when he prayed, he talked about fearing God. Okay? Number 2, in this chapter, he talks about it here, and later on at the end of the chapter, he brings it up again. I'll tell you, back in the old days, in the 1800s, America was a nation where the people feared God. And so they would close down their shops on Sunday. They would restrain themselves from evil because they feared God. And right now today, I would say, if I had to choose between an ordinary church member and a person who didn't come to church but said, I fear God, I can tell you which one governs his life more according to the Scriptures. And so he says, don't you know that it's good to fear God? Verse 10, let's read that. So he says, look, here's what I am doing, and much of what's been going on is going to be expanded on in the rest of the chapter. And you know what? What he's doing is this. Remember, how long has Nehemiah been in Judah? Is the wall finished yet? No. How long did it take to finish the wall? 52 days. So he's been here less than 2 months. So he hasn't even had time to do loans and finish the paperwork, all right? They're speeding it up nowadays, but it still takes a long time. So he's including himself. He says, I'm going to be part of the solution. I want you to be a part of the solution. He's not somebody who's actually done this, but he identifies with them. And he's so Christ-like, like Jesus, who comes down and identifies with humanity in all of its sinfulness. And so he calls them to do different things. He could have come in because he was, what position over here? He was the governor. And he could have done like Alice in Wonderland, said, off with their head, I'm going to confiscate all your property, and then we're going to redistribute it. But instead, he says, here's my example. Brothers, let's work together and let's learn to sacrifice together. Let us have compassion for the poor. I am as the poor. I'm going to give. I'm not going to take what's coming to me as governor. And he goes through and he does all of these things. Okay. So I'm going to have to retract what I said. We're not going to read all of this because we're running out of time. But That is all an expansion, all right? So you go back and you're going to be amazed at what he did. He was like spending money like crazy. And he wasn't just spending money to take care of everybody, but he was what? In the work of building the wall? Yeah, no harder worker. Taking care of both governing as well as in the building. He never did anything, or he never asked them to do anything that he wasn't doing first. You know, God's will has always been for God's people to dwell together in unity. We read Psalm 133, right? That short 3-verse psalm. You want to memorize a psalm to show off? You can memorize Psalm 133. How good it is. How much pleasure it gives to God if we will dwell together in unity. For 3 years in the New Testament, we see Jesus working to get his apostles together. And he made it extra hard for himself. He included a diversity of people. And, you know, it would have been so much easier if he had gotten all scholars, right? Or if he had gotten all fishermen. But he brings in a tax collector. He brings in a political rebel. He brings in these guys who are temperamentally a little bit hotheads, you know, John and James. And he brings them together. Why? Because you cannot learn love in homogeneity. Only when you have to reach beyond what's natural and easy do you grow in love. And that's what he did for 3 years. And he told them in John 13:35, by this all people will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. This is the only way that people will know for sure that you're a believer, if you are developing in love. Because God says, I poured out my love into you, Romans 5. And so you're not able to love? Maybe you have never received that outpouring of love. He says in his prayer for the future church, John 17:23, I in them and you in me, that they may become perfectly one, so the world may know that you sent me and loved them, even as you have loved me. He's saying, you know what? The world has every right to not believe the gospel, that the Father and the Son offered unconditional love if we don't attain to that kind of love. And some people got it, but you know what? It was a struggle. Right through the reading of the New Testament and the letters to the churches there, they struggled to learn this kind of love. But some people got it. But it's not easy. You know, I appreciate our development in learning to build community. Some of you will do little things. You check up on people when they're absent. You will sit with one another. You will provide things for other people in the church. You will do good things. You will socialize together. There's some who go to movies together. There's others who go golfing together. There's others who do Bible study together. And you do 1,000 little things. And this is what it requires, to you to take individual personal action. You guys love the Three Musketeers story? What was their motto? One for all and all for one. That's how the church needs to be. That's the way we need to be. And so I give you 6 things that you can do, and you can read them through. We need to fear God, follow his rules. We need to treat everybody with respect. We have to learn compassion for those who are hurting. We need to get involved in each other's lives. We need to be servants. We lead by serving. And we find a lot of positive little things to do. I try to get the people who do refreshments, between our service and Sunday school. I said, cut back. Don't cook so much. Don't prepare so much. And you know what? They couldn't do it because they felt like it builds community. I'm thinking efficiency and cleanup, and they're thinking community. Okay? So I love what we're doing, and we need to find more ways. What is it you can do? You may be doing it. Can you do it a little better? Can you do it a little more? Can you think of new ways to do it so that this will be the kind of place where people will look back to and think fondly, wow, I was really nourished. My soul was blessed while I spent my time here. That's our challenge. This is what God wants for us. And, you know, it's not that hard, but it has to rise to our consciousness and it has to become our priority. And so just like God took this whole topic that follows chapter 7 and put it right there in chapter 5 in the middle of talking about the wall, we're seeing it now and we can follow it. All right? So anyway, we got our children outside and we're going to welcome them in. They don't see my waving? Okay, maybe we all need to wave. Okay, let's welcome them as they come on in. See, and some of these are too young to really know cognitively, but in their hearts, they feel it. They experience it, and it has an impact. We're appreciative of Sandy and her co-workers and all that they have done to develop this ministry.